Hello, today on a special What's That About? We're excited to talk to Councillor Sumbul Siddiqui, Cambridge City Councillor since 2018 and recent two-term mayor. And on this week's episode, we want to discuss Cambridge Rise Up or Rise Up Cambridge, the first in the nation cash assistance program covering everyone who meets the income requirements. Thanks for coming on our show, Councillor Siddiqui.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Great. First of all, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and what was your experience growing up here in Cambridge?
Yeah, sure. So Cambridge is my hometown, and it's really shaped who I am. I came here from Pakistan with my parents and my twin brother at around almost two. And, we came here for kind of this American dream. And that really meant for my parents just to find a better life for my twin and I. And so we were lucky to be in a place like Cambridge that had various resources like affordable housing. My mom and dad, their careers in their respective countries really didn't translate over here. And so they had a hard time really just raising us. But my experience with Cambridge was that there were so many programs and resources, and we were able to benefit. And I just loved growing up here.
Great. And you went to Cambridge Ridge and Latin?
I went to, yeah, Cambridge Public Schools my whole life, and I went to Cambridge Ranger Latin, and that was a really fun experience.
You must have had a better high school days than I did. Um, and so, what drove you to get involved in politics here, and specifically the city council?
So when I was actually a high school student, I got involved in local politics and I learned about civic engagement and youth voice in local government. And we worked alongside adult supporters and other young people. And we created this youth council. And now this youth council is in its, I think, 23rd year. So that's now the Cambridge Youth Council, what it's now known as. And that experience in high school, I went to City Hall. I learned about how decisions got made, and that I think early experience really shaped me. And I think in the back of my head, I was like, wow, I'm looking at these city councilors and the mayor. They're listening to me, and this seems like a really great job that they have. I want to do that one day. And I had that in the back of my mind. I didn't know how I was going to make that happen. I had no idea, but I was just like, this is amazing. And so I think, I ended up going to college. I studied public policy. I got my law degree. And then I eventually moved back to Cambridge. I also did an AmeriCorps fellowship. So I was always squarely in kind of like public interest and government territory. And right before I was running for council, I was a legal aid attorney at Northeast Legal Aid. And so I was doing that work. And I loved being a lawyer for many reasons, and I am still active in the bar, but I think I was looking for an opportunity to work not only one-on-one with constituents. I knew that was something I loved, but I wanted to work on some broader policy issues. And I think at that time I was getting more involved in Cambridge and what it was at that point in my adult life. And so I joined a nonprofit board, the Cambridge School Volunteers board. I then also became a commissioner for the city of Cambridge for the Department of Human Services. And so I got kind of that education of what was going on. And then also after the 2016 election, I think I also felt like I could get more involved um, in the local community in the backdrop of just overt xenophobia, Islamophobia, racism that was being displayed in our highest office. And so I think I wanted to have a way to combine my interest in policy issues and constituent services, and I felt like government was the way to do that.
Great. Yeah, I found after 2016, I mean, I got more involved in political issues locally as well. It kind of not a different aspect of it, but yeah, it definitely kind of woke me up a little bit.
Right.
Fortunately, here we are again.
Yeah.
Where did you go to America? Just out of my curiosity, where did they send you?
Well, it was a different kind of AmeriCorps. It was this AmeriCorps through the New Sector Alliance, residency and social enterprise. And so they placed you at a nonprofit.
Okay,
And so I was placed at a place called New Profit, which is a venture philanthropy fund well, it was in Cambridge at that point. It's in
okay.
Boston now. So it was a good overview of kind of nonprofits and
Hmm.
kind of it was more nonprofit consulting than the typical AmeriCorps experience, but
Okay,
still it was a very impactful to me.
great. And are there specific issues you focus on the council now that you find yourself kind of gravitating to?
Yeah, given that I grew up in affordable housing in the city, I grew up in the Ringe Towers, 364 Ringe Ave, up until I was almost in sixth grade. And then we moved to the Roosevelt mid-rise units in East Cambridge, Wellington, Harrington, technically. And my parents still live there. And so I think housing issues and housing policies, affordable housing, uh, are key specific areas. I think city initiatives that support our most, I think, vulnerable um, people in our community is something that keeps the work interesting to me and motivates me. So issues around, of course, education, economic mobility,
Mhm.
are all kind of key areas I've focused on.
Okay. Great. I mean, I have all kinds of things I'd like to ask you, but this episode, I just want to focus on you did some groundbreaking work to help found the some basic income guaranteed income programs, beginning with Cambridge Rise pilot study and then the Rise Up Cambridge program. Can you give us a brief overview of Rise Up? Like, how did it start? What was the intent of the program?
Yeah, so Rise Up, came along after we had completed the pilot, Cambridge Rise. And so, just to give you that background, I
Mm,
think when the pandemic hit, I was a few months into serving as mayor, and I think definitely my priority at that time was helping residents right away, and figuring out how. And so, we actually provided financial assistance to residents through the mayor's COVID-19 disaster relief fund, which actually raised about $5 million. And that was distributed as one-time payments. And I remember the feedback from people who received the money was that it was such a lifeline through such a difficult time and really helped them through that patch. But I also kept hearing from our residents that given how impactful it was, how they could keep getting supported. And so for me, starting that pilot, and it wasn't just me, it was a whole group of people coming together. And RISE stands for Reoccurring Income for Success and Empowerment. That kind of was an obvious first step to really support families during the hardest of times. And so we were able to get this challenge grant from an organization called the Mayors for Guaranteed Income. And that was about $500,000. And that led to us, again, working with more stakeholders in the community to raise more money to support 130 households for 18 months. And so we were able to do that. That was from September 21 to February 23rd. We were getting data and we were, watching how our residents who were in this pilot were benefiting, we used the data to determine, who could be selected, what could a future program could look like. And ultimately at that time, when I got into my second term, we knew that the city was getting some money from the federal government. And so that's what led to Rise Up Cambridge. And so it was really, it was separate, but it was kind of on the heels of knowing, okay, we're helping 130 people. We know there's a whole more, there's more need, and there are more families who could really benefit. And so that's how Rise Up came. And that was almost a $20 million commitment from really the city of Cambridge using federal dollars to provide assistance to families with kids. And the criteria was you had to have children at, who are 21 or under, and you had to be at a very specific federal poverty guideline level, which was at or below 250%. And each of these families would get $500 for 18 months. So that ran from really the summer of 23. I think the first payments went out August 23, and it just ended in February. The last payments went out in February of 2025.
Did you set those income requirements just based on the amount of the pool of money available, or?
Exactly. Yeah, I think we did some focus groups, right? And I think ultimately we knew that there are a lot of populations who could benefit, right? I think we have a big elder community. There are a lot of people who don't have children, right? But I think we worked kind of with the COC and other nonprofits and said, how do we think about the group who could be eligible for the cash assistance? Um, what we're hearing from community members about the need, what nonprofits are seeing, and how much money we have to then figure out the kind of the nitty-gritty of the the poverty guidelines and the amount. I think a lot of the work that also happened, which was very behind the scenes and not a lot of people saw, was the work around securing public benefit waivers, so that people didn't lose their benefits, because we have something called the benefit cliff that we have to figure out, that says, you make a little bit more money and then your rent goes up, you lose benefits, and then you're kind of in this cycle.
Yeah,
And so we worked a lot on that. And that kind of also, dictated some of how we were able to get support for doing these programs.
yeah. I never even considered that. That's interesting. Yeah. And so this is the first program that I know of that everyone is eligible for who met the requirements, right? There's no lottery for it. How does it compare with other cash assistance programs or studies that have done? Is this the only one that does something like that in a municipality?
Yeah, I do think this Rise Up is unique. I would say our eligible income level is relatively high, which is the 250% of the federal poverty line, which I mentioned. I think a lot of the other studies that have happened, the pilots that have happened, uh, the individuals who are eligible are often with far lower income. So that's one difference is in this group. And then I think the scale is different, right? I think we had almost 2,000 Rise Up families
Mhm.
compared to the other studies that it's about 100 to maybe 300 families of most pilots. Um, and I think our research design for Rise Up also is different. It kind of takes advantage of the novelty of Rise Up by explicitly comparing experiences and outcomes across subgroups of families defined by different income scales. You couldn't really do this without a wide range of eligible incomes, and the large number of households who are enrolled. And so those are some of the differences. I think for the most part, a lot of what we've heard from families about what they're doing with the cash, how helpful it is, that has been very consistent or across the board in many of these studies, saying cash really helps, and so there's really no, I don't think there's any rocket science there. Our evaluation for Rise Up has involved an organization called MDRC, and they're this independent nonprofit social policy and research organization, and they're studying kind of the outcomes and impact of the program. And another way this study is different is that there is no randomized control trial. And so I think we did that for various reasons. I think we really felt that there was much more compelling data that we could get from in-depth interviews, surveys, focus groups, and kind of key questions. And I think I think, as to my earlier point, a lot of the research out there already kind of says this works.
Mhm.
It's more, what else can we do?
Yeah. Are there any like preliminary results or reports out there from that independent organization that they've done, or is it kind of still in the works?
So some of it hasn't been released like publicly, no final report yet. We've had interim updates and reports, and that has shared information around kind of what does it take to implement a citywide cash assistance initiative. It's shared some information on what are households' perspectives about the initiative and cash payments. It is now slowly sharing some information about outcomes. Again, very positive things that are coming out
Hmm.
from what we're seeing so far.
Yeah. Yeah, it's exciting. It seems like just like an unmitigated good thing that the city was doing. And our show covered it briefly when you first started the pilot a few years ago, so we're not impartial. Um, but like now that the ARPA funds are going to be gone, and obviously the federal government is going to be ponying up any more money um, in the near future anyway. What is the status of the kind of basic income program? And I guess it's over right now. Is there any hope for it continuing in the future?
I think it's a to be determined. I think given that we have had other pools of money, we've had philanthropy help with the first pilot, we had the second pilot with the federal government, and now we're looking at city money. And actually, nowhere has really used city money and city budget money
Mm.
for a program like this. And so I think I knew that. And in September of 2024, we put in a policy order kind of to start this conversation about what could be next? What could the future of this look like in the city? And we eventually received a response from the city in March of this year. So it took a while to get this to us, but the gist of the feedback was that the city felt that we can't really do something that's kind of an unrestricted guaranteed basic income program legally because of something called the anti-aid amendment, which you can't just give people money. But they did state to us that they felt that a cash assistance programming where we could require, selected participants to attest that they were using the cash, distributions toward a recognized public purpose that was predetermined by the city. That could be something related to education, something related to food insecurity or housing, that would unlikely violate the anti-aid amendment. And it would also be possible to provide cash assistance that could be used more generally if it's provided to support those living in poverty with their basic needs, and that those basic needs are defined or that were there's prohibited uses that are clearly defined. And so that was kind of like a very the legal memo basically said you could do something like this and use tax money. So I think that was overall a big plus. And then a group of us, we worked to shape some options so that we could get a sense of what the program could look like and then figure out how the what the cost would be. And so we had some meetings on that. I think ultimately right now we're in a difficult point because of the macroeconomic environment, making it hard for the city to invest in something like this. And, I think what we've heard is commercial property values are going down, declining revenues from building permits. We have a lot of capital projects. And then, as you've mentioned, there's a lot of uncertainty on the federal government. And so I think with these budget conversations, even though our policy order with my group of my colleagues said, come back in this budget cycle, it very much was interpreted by the city manager as not something for this FY26, but for the future. I think my goal was to get something as soon as possible, but given the realities, it's looking like that, we aren't going to get something in this year's budget, which is hard to, it's hard to not have that happen, but it's in the context of a lot of the other issues that we're hearing about.
Yeah, I saw. I mean, I know that one of the benefits of this program is it's guaranteed income, so you can rely on it. And if it gets cut off, that's obviously not ideal. Um, and there was some discussion of it last night at the city council meeting, right? It kind of you asked the city to come back with some sort of plan in August. Is that right?
Yeah, we asked for an update in August. I think we're pretty close as far as we've have options that were presented at the Human Services meeting, and now the question is how much could we find in whether that's out of free cash or if we are waiting until next year's budget, which I hope we don't, I
Yeah.
hope that we can figure out an interim step. So that was a conversation. I think it's I think I wish we had prioritized this in this year's budget, but there was just not enough, I think, council support for that.
Yeah. I mean, just me. I think I would happily pay more for parking permit or, there's all kinds of things in Cambridge is very cheap relatively that we could pay a little more for a unmitigated good like this kind of program. But I know I'm
I agree. I agree.
fired here. Um, do you have the opposite where there's opposition to this program in the council or wherever? What do you see that looking like? Why are some people not wanting to? Is it just like, oh, we don't have enough money, or like what are the reasons behind it? Are there philosophical reasons?
Yeah, I'd say I think that most people on the council have been supportive of the idea, and I think they've seen that people have come and shared their really great experiences, and I think there's positive there that I've heard from, I think, most of my colleagues. I think the real issue has been the money, and when money's tight, that's where government becomes cautious about the long-term implications of funding, programs that we kind of all support in concept. But when you put your money where your mouth is, I think people are like, oh, this is too expensive, so we can't do it. So, I do think it's challenging because there are things in the budget where I'd say I'd rather not fund these anymore or this anymore if it meant if we could fund this, but it's a little bit too late for that. And so I think we're just going to keep trying to figure out how we can still prioritize this in the future at a later point. But I think I made this remark in the meeting, I think when I put the PO in September of 24, I didn't put my intent was not to have something then get funded in the summer of 26.
Yeah,
I think it was semantics, and I think I wish the city manager he and I had better communication around that because a successor program 2 years from when it ends is not a successor program.
right.
And so I do think I do disagree with kind of the framing on that part of it, but I also recognize that, this is the key, and the staff have been pretty consistent that we couldn't add spending in FY 26 and that we really couldn't do certain things. And I think it's a challenging dynamic, and then the council has the responsibility to approve and reject budgets, but we can't increase without the city manager's support. And I think getting the whole council on board with something like this too is challenging. And so how do you build consensus? And so it was one of those things where it was like all those things impacted the potential of it getting funded for this year,
Yeah.
fiscal year.
Is there any value to getting people to like call counselors, email, city manager?
Definitely the city manager, I'd say. I think at this point, though, what my hope would be that I don't know if we'll need all that money. It's too early to tell that we're putting away in the stabilization fund.
Mhm.
And if we don't need that money, I'd say we should put it towards this. And then I think we should figure out how we allocate some free cash and then maybe raise some money. I don't know. I think we should get creative, but I hate the thought of this really not anything happening until next July.
Yeah, yeah, that would be too bad.
But we've heard a lot of compelling testimony from residents already.
Yeah,
But I think there is this huge concern about the future and what we do. And but I think it's interesting. If you own a condo or own real estate, you get this residential tax exemption, you get all these benefits. No one talks about that, but then when you talk about giving people some resources and money, it's like, where's the data to back that up? Or we should evaluate that really further. And it's just really interesting conversations that I've had with many people. And I think I just say, like, imagine making $23,000 a year and having a family of three.
right. And I own a condo in Cambridge. I get the residential,
Right.
and so I'm paying some of the lowest residential taxes in the state to live in one of the wealthiest cities in the country. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think we could afford, and right now I haven't heard that we have to raise the tax, but we could afford a little more to pay
Absolutely.
this. Yeah. Um, well, so it's 5 o'clock. I don't know if you have a hard out, or if you
I can stay on.
okay, great. Well, I just wanted to ask you, I think in the current situation in this city, and thank you for talking about Rise Up Cambridge. I really appreciate you coming on to explain the situation. But um, as you said, the city's going to be facing some unexpected challenges the next 4 years from the federal government. I mean, we've seen that ICE has been active in Somerville, abducting people off the streets. In Worcester, just on Thursday, they abducted a mother, and we saw that the Worcester police got involved and obstructed the citizens who were trying to prevent that them taking that person. Um, Even though Worcester said they promised they wouldn't help ICE. And I guess my question is the Worcester police. This is a long-winded question, but do we have guarantees? I know CPD's Cambridge Police Department said they would not, get involved in federal actions, but do we have guarantees that they won't do what happened in Worcester and start arresting people who were, you know, involved in that ICE action?
I think that's a great question. I will say that I think, yes, sure, as you've said, CPD has publicly said they wouldn't comply with ICE unless they're mandated, to cooperate with formal investigations. And what that looks like in actuality, I'm not sure. And so I think the council has been very clear around, well, first, we need to do a lot of know your rights trainings and education, and the staff has really been amazing. And we asked the city manager to first, forward a letter to Cambridge organizations and city departments regarding kind of what our sanctuary um, city status says and what that means and what the resources are available. Um, and secondly, we've also, after the arrest of the kidnapping of the tough student, we also kind of put in another request to just say, like, we really stand against this and what happened, and we want to make sure that there are, you know, we affirm that we're, a sanctuary city. We provide resources. We want the Cambridge Police Department to be involved, and be able to really mitigate violations like this and not be a part of, um, you know, a part of being involved at all. Essentially, we haven't received a response to actually what we can do. I think the legal department is trying to really figure out, okay, kind of what you've asked, like a scenario like this, like what would happen and how would it play out. But we've gone on record and said, we feel like these actions from the federal government do pose such a serious threat to public safety and undermine community trust. And, um, we don't want our police department to be part of it.
Do your communication it goes through the manager to the police department? You don't, is that the way it works?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I could call up their commissioner, who's very easy to get in touch with, and I have in the past, and she'll always respond, and she's responsive. I think right now, I've been surprised that we haven't seen something like this in Cambridge.
Yeah.
I have been very surprised.
Yeah. It seems to be all around us so far.
Right.
Yeah. Scary times.
Yeah, scary times.
Is there anything else you'd like to talk about that I didn't ask you? Something you wish I'd asked you? Um,
No, I hope it was an okay interview for you.
yeah. No, it was great. I mean, I think I've got everything that I wanted, definitely. The other thing, if you don't mind, I also noticed last night that you got 25
Yeah.
vouchers for people from the closing Transition Wellness Center in Spalding.
Yeah.
Where are can those be used for people they're closing it's already closed, right? Or is it being closed?
It's being closed, yeah.
Mhm. How,
So my understanding is that they we have a process through our continuum of care, um, that, I think that's a whole other issue. They're maybe losing money. But there's a list that goes through that body. And this continuum of care, it's really to help, as I said, the unhoused individuals. And that's really where that's kind of the list. And so that's who gets into supportive housing and so forth. So as is mentioned last night, there's no guarantee that these people who are in left at the transition wellness center will then be getting these vouchers because of this list that exists. And it's a little complicated, but that's my understanding of it. They could get them, but we can't say you can match these vouchers to these people at this time because there's another list that there's a whole list that's being worked on.
And that voucher is the idea is if there's an opening, someone can use in the city.
Yeah, and then if there's permanent supportive housing that they would have access to that.
Yeah. 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 Again, priorities, huh? Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's we have in our budget we do have a lot on what we're doing, but it's kind of like when you compare it, you did kind of an audit, like given our $1 billion budget, how can we prioritize things that are much more impactful to people's lives, right?
yeah.
I think about that a lot. We made an expenditure of 500,000 to replace guns. And
Right.
I'm like, why did we do that? I mean, I didn't vote for it. My conscience is clear. But, I think it's one of those things where, I am just thinking through, there's so many things that I'm like, if we are in this time of reprioritizing and doing other things, it's difficult, but how do we do that in a very transparent and open manner?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, thank you. Thank you for your thoughts and thanks for coming on. Um, Sumbul Siddiqui, thank you for being our guest. I hope we can have you back to on future episodes to discuss any Cambridge political issues. Uh,
Happy to.
Great. Um, Thanks so much. Thanks again.
Yeah, of course. Nice to see you.
Yeah. All right.
Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
So long.